This story happened when I was about 4 years old. About a year previously, my mom had divorced, and she moved with me and my sister in with a friend at her place in Fremont, California. My mom's friend had a daughter who was 3 years old too, so there were 2 younger girls and me. During that time, my mom went to a garage sale in San Francisco. It was one of those Victorian homes there. From what I was told, she went down to the basement, and there were a bunch of pictures, painted pictures, not just prints, but real painted art. Some of them were finished, others not. What was interesting about this basement is there was a painted scene on top of the ceiling, instead of it just being white, part representing heaven and the other part hell. When my mom started asking around, it appeared that the people were, I don't want to say satanic, but she mentioned something similar to that, something more on the dark side. But that didn't stop my mom from buying a painting she thought was beautiful. It portrayed a woman with blonde hair sitting on a rocking chair in a white gown. My mom loved the picture, brought it home, and found a place to put it. It ended up being hung on the wall between the upstairs and the downstairs. Soon after that, this painting started randomly falling off the wall. I remember this happening several times, although I was just a kid. It wasn't as though the nail was bent or the sheetrock was giving away. It would suddenly just fall off the wall. My mom would hear the crash and go and put it back up. This happened quite a few times, to the point where my mom and her friend had started to wonder what the heck was going on. I should also tell you that the space we lived in echoed a lot for some reason. If you were upstairs, you could hear things downstairs as if you were much closer than you were. In the middle of the night, we would start to hear the faucet in the kitchen start to drip water. You could hear it really clearly. Drip, drip, drip. My mom would go down there and shut it off. One night, my mom and her friend hosted a get-together, and the painting I mentioned fell off the wall during the party. I remember going up the stairs and some of the adults were talking about it. My mom was telling some of the people, "Yeah, it just keeps falling off. Once again, there it is, on the floor." A few days after that party is when it started getting really interesting. This is where all of us, especially us kids, started to get really scared. In the middle of the night, maybe 2 or 3 a.m., we would start to hear a lady downstairs crying really softly. We didn't know what to do or how to react to this. I remember being in the room with my sister and my mom's roommate's daughter. And my mom and her friend came into our room. They opened the door and just stood there. We all listened to the crying. They were too scared to go downstairs. They wanted to come be with us while this continued. Eventually, it mellowed out. But the next night, it happened again. My mom and her friend came to our room, and the crying was just a little louder. The crying became moaning and sobbing. I can envision this figure, maybe with her hands covering her eyes, crying, looking down into her lap. That's the kind of crying it was. I just remember lying there. We were all looking at each other while we heard this. A few nights go by, and it happens again. At this point, my mom and her friend are really scared. After that, we all just knew it was going to happen again. About a week later, it got to the point where the crying was incredibly loud. It started out soft, and then it got louder and louder. Then it just went explosive. It was so loud, you could literally feel the crying through the walls, like the woman was just crying and bawling her eyes out. My mom, her friend, and all of us were so shocked and scared. My mom and her friend immediately ran into our room, turned on the lights, and grabbed us. They didn't even let us change from our pajamas. I just remember my mom grabbing us out of bed. We all ran to the stairs at once. There was a pause before we went downstairs, and then we rushed down. Luckily, we didn't have to pass the living room, and that's where this intense crying was coming from. I remember running out that door, and all of us were frantic. I was holding on to my mom, and the crying was so loud. Then we had to go around the community pool, which was right in front of the sliding glass doors to our living room. Our sliding door didn't have curtains, so we could see inside our apartment. The parking lot was on the other side of the pool within sight of our place. So when we got into the car, we could see right into the living room. That's when my mom and her friend freaked out, because when we looked inside our apartment, there was a lady in a white gown sitting on a rocking chair, just rocking. She was the figure in the painting. My mom and her friend started to scream. I remember my mom's friend trying to get the keys into the ignition to start the car, and she couldn't do it. I remember us kids screaming. We were just terrified. My mom's friend finally got the keys into the ignition. It was in the early hours of the morning, and we just drove straight to my grandmother's house, which was in the next town. When we got there, us kids, we never went back. My mom had to go with some people and immediately evacuate to get her stuff and get out. So did her friend. From that point on, me and my mom and my sister stayed with my grandmother for years until she eventually remarried again. My sister knows what happened to the painting. I really don't know. I can't remember. I don't want to say that she trashed it or gave it away, but I'm not sure. I will never, ever forget seeing that rocking woman from the painting. It's impossible. It's funny when you're an adult and look back. You can try and think that it must have been a dream. You can remember it as it happened, or you can turn it off and pretend it never did. Well, no, it wasn't a dream. This was something we all experienced. The truth is, it really happened. We ended up at my grandmother's house, and we never went back. That's it. It's hard for me to talk about it, even now. Just remembering that incident is scary as hell.